Yes, how are we all? I hope all is well. My name is Sachin, and this is the Total Cricket Podcast, episode 21. Today I'm going to be reviewing the fourth and final test between England and South Africa, so let's get started. England won this one by 177 runs, and in doing so, wrapped up the series 3 games to 1. A good win for England, but certainly a lot of questions to be answered for South Africa. We'll begin with the recap. England, they won the toss and elected to bat much like they did at the Oval, and once again, just like they did at the Oval, they were able to get 350 plus on the board. 362, they got a very decent first innings total given the overcast conditions and the green pitch, and they were really carried by Johnny Bairstow, a fantastic 99, desperately unlucky not to get to his 100, and he was also supported ably by Ben Stokes and Joe Root. They both got 50s. Alistair Cook also chipped in with 46. And it was a very decent total for England. Certainly one that, given the circumstances, looked like a winning total from the get-go. South Africa's bowlers, they all chipped in. Kaiso Rabada, he picked up 4. Morne Morkel, Dwan Olafia coming back in the team. And Keshav Maharaj, they all got 2 wickets apiece. And South Africa, in reply, they only managed 226, bundled out. No one got a half century. Temba Bavuma was the top scorer with 46, and apart from him, just a smattering of starts, but nothing of any real substance. Once again, South Africa's batting proving to be a big issue for them. Jimmy Anderson was the pick of the bowlers. He got a fourfer. Stuart Broad chipped in with 3. Toby Rowland-Jones, he got 1. And Moeen Ali, he got the other 2 wickets. So England took a lead of 136 runs into the second innings, and they built on it to score 243 and set South Africa 380 to win the game in the fourth innings. England did a good job given the pitch was deteriorating quite a lot. Joe Root, I thought it was a masterclass from him. 49 he got in very trying circumstances, but it was Moeen Ali who put the nail in South Africa's coffin with a brilliant 75 not out of 66 deliveries. And really, 380 on that pitch, you're not going to chase it. At one point, it looked like South Africa could maybe restrict England to setting them 280, 290 to win, but Moeen's innings put any chance of that to bed. South Africa's bowlers, Morne Morkel, he bowled well, he got 4 for, Rabada got 2, Dwan Olafia, he got 3, and Keshav Maharaj, he got 1. And in the chase, South Africa, well, they were bundled out for 202. Really, only 2 contributions of any note. Hashim Amla, he got 83, and Faf du Plessis, he got 61. They shared an 123 run stand for the 4th wicket that gave South Africa a little bit of hope. But when Amla was out, then that hope really disintegrated very quickly, and the rest of the batting subsided very quickly indeed, and the game was over just after tea on the 4th day. The main man was Moeen Ali, as he has been throughout this series. He got a 5 for. Toby Rowland-Jones, Stuart Broad, they picked up a wicket apiece, and Jimmy Anderson, he got the other 3 wickets. And England won the test very comfortably in the end. And now, let's get into the breakdown, and I'm going to start with South Africa. This was once again a very disappointing performance from South Africa, a tired-looking South Africa. They looked like they wanted to get back on the plane home. It's been a long tour. They've been here since May in England, so it's been several months, and it certainly showed in this game. It was a pretty feeble performance with the bat, certainly. Just starting with the batting for South Africa, Dean Elgar, he failed twice in this game. He has been South Africa's best batsman on this tour. He got 2 very good deliveries, to be fair to him. And sometimes in the English conditions, when you're facing Anderson and Broad, sometimes they're going to get you out and you can't do much about it. And I felt for Dean Elgar, that was the case in this game. But in the end of the day, Dean Elgar was the only Centurion for South Africa in this series. And he's a key cog in the batting order. So certainly I wouldn't have any worries about Dean Elgar. Heino Kuhn, I think this is the final nail in his coffin. I can't see him being picked again. He did not get a 50 in the 8 innings he played on this tour. In fact, he didn't go past 34 in any of them. He struggled greatly and he looked out of his depth. The gulf between him and Elgar was very clear. He just did not look like a guy who was capable of scoring runs at the test level. Yes, he's playing against very good bowling in challenging conditions, but you need to get runs somehow. You're not going to be able to score runs every innings, but you've got to chip in at least one innings per test match, you would think. And he was really unable to do that. The only innings of note, I guess, was that 34, his top score at Trent Bridge, where he and Hashim Amla combined to only give England one wicket in the first innings, there in the first session of the game, in very difficult batting conditions. But apart from that, really nothing to speak of for Haino Kun. He's 33 years old. I think that will also count against him. There's a very young guy in Aiden Markram who's 23, 22 years old, who's waiting in the wings. And I think looking at their next series against Bangladesh at home, South Africa will be very keen, I think, to get Markram involved. Or even maybe get back Stephen Cook, because comparing Stephen Cook to Haino Kun, I think Stephen Cook would have been a better option than Haino Kun. Hashim Amla, the enigma, the conundrum of Hashim Amla continues. I believe now it's 28 innings in overseas tests without 100. He did okay in this game. He got strangled down the leg side in the first innings, and then in the second innings, he got a very nice 83. That was the top score in that innings until he was trapped LBW by Moeen Ali. And he got 350s on this tour, but crucially no hundreds. He is the linchpin of this batting lineup. No Graham Smith, no Jacques Kallis, no AB de Villiers. I understand now that he doesn't have the guys around him to take that pressure off. Now the pressure's on him, and he's not delivering for South Africa away from home. And really, it's a big problem when your best batsman is struggling. To me, Amla, there's nothing necessarily that I can pick that's deteriorated, because he's always been a guy who doesn't use his feet much. He has a fantastic eye. He's a very elegant player, and he plays from his crease, really. But I think for Amla, it's almost perhaps a mental thing. I think that's a big possibility. I think it also might be bowlers getting used to bowling to him, knowing exactly where to bowl to him. And I think loss of form, lack of confidence, because Hashim Amla has got runs the way he's been playing all his test career. So to me, those are certainly possibilities of what could be happening, but it's a big issue for South Africa, Amla's continued failings. Now, in this game, Temba Bavuma, he was elevated to number 4. The seeming revolving door for South Africa at number 4 in this series. They tried 3. JP Duminy in the first game, he was dropped, and I don't think we'll ever see him again. Then we saw Quinton de Kock. He was the number 4 for the second and third test. He had a good start. He got a 50 in the first innings he played, but then 3 failures has now meant Temba Bavuma has gone up there. And Temba Bavuma definitely has the technique. He's a very good technical player. But is he a guy you want at number 4 to really be the linchpin of your batting? Number 4 is a very key position. He only has 1 test century in 24 games, and he's a guy who will never dominate the bowling. I feel like you want guys at 3 and 4 who can really just kill the bowling. And Temba Bavuma is an accumulator. He's a grafter. I like him more at 6, although given South Africa's issues, he may be forced to continue at 4. He did okay in this test. Once again, he always looks decent, but the big runs never come. He got a 46, and then he left one from Jimmy Anderson, the in-swinger, the classic Jimmy Anderson delivery, the setup. It was all there, and he was bowled. And then in the second innings, he was caught behind of Toby Rowland Jones. But he looked good, as he always does. For Temba Bavuma, if you look at him in this series, I believe his top score, I'm trying to think what his top score was. I don't think he got to even 60. I might be wrong on that, but definitely he didn't get to 70. But at the same time, he got into double figures in all 8 innings. He's not a guy that's going to fail, but he's not a guy that's going to get you big runs. He needs to become a guy who can score big runs, and he needs to become a guy who can score runs almost when you're dominating. He scores his runs when South Africa's under great pressure with the bat. But when they're dominating the game, he seems to struggle more. It's a really bizarre trait from Temba Bavuma, but it definitely seems like he's got that in him. And for me, obviously, he's worth persisting with. Number of reasons why. Obviously, helps immensely with the transformation targets. He's a great fielder, and he's a competent player at test level. But he averages 31 at the end of the day after 24 tests. That really has to pick up. So certainly for Bavuma, it's about going on with it from now. And Faf du Plessis, well, he did okay in this game. To be fair to Faf du Plessis, he got a nice 61 in the second innings, but he did fail in the first innings, just a little start, 27. He was bowled by Jimmy Anderson, chopping on there. And then in the second innings, he just got a little feather on the under edge, trying to pull one from Anderson again. Faf du Plessis has not delivered with the bat in this tour. Another issue for South Africa. And du Plessis' batting in general hasn't been great recently. He hasn't scored 100 in the 8 tests he has played this year. That doesn't cut it. Particularly as the captain leading from the front, he needs to be scoring hundreds. And du Plessis, I feel, has been a little bit negative. I mean, in general, his greatest strength in his test batting is definitely his patience and his ability to negate very good bowling. But I think he almost went too into his shell, and I think he was very inhibited, particularly in the last game where he was out 2 times leaving. I think a little bit more of a proactive mindset from Faf du Plessis could certainly help, because he has all the shots. He just tends to play a little bit more in a conservative style. And definitely the honeymoon period is over for Faf du Plessis' captaincy. Everything he touched turned to gold, but there have been a few things that have come up in these games that have been a bit of an issue. In this game, the field settings to Johnny Bairstow, I thought, it's a weird thing. All captains seem to do this. When you've got an established batsman bowling with a tail ender, you spread the field to the established batsman and just let them have the freedom of the whole field to score. Yes, you put all the men on the boundary, but they can do whatever they want. And I don't understand it. Why are you only trying to get one guy out? You should be trying to get both the guys out. It's a very defensive mindset, and it definitely didn't help South Africa. So certainly we're seeing now that without that sort of Midas touch, if you like, that honeymoon period, it's over, and now there are some issues coming up. How is du Plessis going to react to that with his captaincy? That is yet to be seen. That's going to be a very interesting thing to watch. Quinton de Kock, he was demoted back down the order. He batted at 6 in this innings, and he failed twice. And Quinton de Kock had a very poor tour. If you look at Quinton de Kock's test career prior to this, he came into the series averaging above 50, and he leaves the series, and now that is not the case. He was not good. This is probably the first test series he's played where I thought, wow, he had a poor series, Quinton de Kock. He only averaged 23 in the series, and when you think about the players who got more runs than him, Temba Bavuma scored more runs than him, Dean Elgar scored more runs than him, Hashim Amla scored more runs than him, and he only just scored more runs than Vernon Philander. So it wasn't a great series for him. And look, to be honest with you, I feel like Quinton de Kock, I said at the start of the series, I liked him at 7, and I still feel that's the case. I thought I was proven wrong when he scored that very nice counter-attacking 50 at number 4 in the second game, but then he had 3 failures in a row, and now the instability of his batting position, I'm sure that didn't help. I feel like Quinton de Kock is best suited to the number 7 position, just like Johnny Bairstow is best suited to the number 7 position, and I'll talk about Bairstow later. But when you look at Quinton de Kock, think about it. The ball gets older when he comes in later, the bowlers are more tired, and that combination allows him the freedom. If you have a look at him in this series, when he was coming, the bowlers were fresh, the ball was new, it was nipping around, and he struggled with that ball. Bavuma, Quinton de Kock, he likes to throw his hands at the ball. He's not one to leave a lot of deliveries. He will go after you. And in this series, he nicked off a lot. That was an issue for him, driving the ball and getting caught, with that one angling across him particularly. And in England, you can't be so, I would say, reckless, but you have to be a little bit more selective, I feel, in England. You can't play the way he did, for example, in Australia on flatter pitches that you do in England. I think Quinton de Kock failed to adapt to that. Yes, we know he's a counter-attacking batsman. He's a fearless player who plays his shots. But it's one thing to be aggressive, and it's another thing to be reckless. And I think Quinton de Kock went that way. It's his first bad series, I feel, as a Test cricketer. Growing pains. This is going to be good for him to learn, to evolve as a batsman. But I think it will help him to just stay in that number 7 role. It appears that South Africa will give Temba Bavuma a go at number 4. So just let Quinton de Kock do his thing at 7. That is my advice to South Africa. And Dennis de Bruin, he came back into the team for this one as Chris Morris. He didn't make the game, he was injured, and he disappointed Dennis de Bruin. Another failure, twin failure for him. He's played 3 tests now, 6 innings, and he doesn't have a test 50 to his name. Obviously, he faced good bowling, and definitely it was a case of, in the second innings, Moeen Ali, very nice delivery, and in the first innings, it was James Anderson bowled a nice delivery to him. But De Bruin has yet to show his quality. Obviously, 3 tests, given that he has been in and out of the team, I think it's unfair to say that he can't play at Test cricket, but the signs aren't great. And from what I would say, he looks like a guy who is maybe just a first class cricketer and not a Test cricketer. He does bowl a little bit of seam up, but I don't think it's good enough for him to be considered even a batting all rounder. So for Tejas de Bruin, I think definitely he's on shaky ice, but I'd still like to see him given a go in South Africa's home summer. Now, that's it for South Africa's batting. Big problems for the batting. It has not clicked at all. It hasn't clicked, to be fair, for a while, and they've been so reliant on their bowling to win them games. It's a huge issue. They've got big issues throughout their order, and they need to be solved quickly. Otherwise, they're going to find it very difficult when Australia and India come to visit in the summer. Now, looking at South Africa's bowling in this game, I thought Morne Morkel, just like he has been throughout this series, he was excellent. He didn't probably get the wickets he deserved, but he's been really good, and it's great to see Morne Morkel back. I think in the whole game, he got, I believe it was 6 wickets, and in the series, he got 19 wickets. He bowled really nicely. The old vintage Morkel was back. That back of the length, steep bounce, particularly threatening to the left hand and getting it to nip off the seam with great accuracy as well. He bowled really well, Morne Morkel. And even though he's 32, he's certainly still much a part of South Africa's future and definitely a boon to them that he has come back into the team with Kyle Abbott going on a Colpack deal and Dale Steyn's injury issues. South Africa need Morne Morkel, and he has been fantastic in this series, and this game was no different. Kagiso Rabada, once again, he picked up wickets. I have no problem with saying that. He got 6 wickets in the game, and he took 16 wickets in the 3 tests he played. But there was something a little bit off about Rabada in this series. If you watched any of the games, I don't think he was really ever at his best. He struggled for rhythm. His control wasn't quite there. He bowled a lot of loose balls, and I felt like sometimes he was sort of going through the motions. Sometimes his speed didn't feel like it was at his best. He just looked a little bit off. Compare it to the Rabada that played against Australia. In Australia, this was a completely different bowler. And to me, there are some explanations to this. I think the amount of cricket he's played, he's a young guy, he's only 21, and he plays virtually every game for South Africa. So I think managing his workload, South Africa have to look at that. The other thing is that it's really part of the scheduling. It's such a tight schedule, and because he plays all formats, there's very little rest, and he's a fast bowler, he's young, he's growing still. He doesn't have a lot of rest, so all his work is really high intensity, big workload. He's had to shoulder the workload. Vernon Philander's fitness problems, obviously, have caused that as well. He's had to bowl a lot of overs, and I think that's certainly another thing. And another possible explanation is that it just might be some random thing. Sometimes bowlers just lose their rhythm and can't quite get back into it for some inexplicable reason. But certainly, Rabada needs to rediscover that because he's such a talented bowler. He was still able to threaten. I thought some of the Yorkers he bowled were unbelievable. And really, the guy, he's going to be a world class bowler for a decade. It's just about getting, I believe, the biggest thing, his workload. I think that's the thing that South Africa can look to do. Now, Duan Olafia, he came back into the team. I'd said previously, I think he's pretty much a backup, and I think this game, again, really confirmed that point of view. He got 3 for in the second innings, to be fair, and he got two for him, so he picked five in the match. But I think the problem for him was his control. That wasn't great. Throughout the two games he played, he was quite expensive. Apart from the second innings here, he bowled very nicely, particularly at the start of his spell. He was very good. When he gets it right, though, he bowls good seam up, Vernon Philander-esque, and just gets it to nip. Can swing it a bit as well, can bowl that heavy ball. But I think ultimately, when you've already got a guy like Philander, you've got Rabada, you've got Morkel, you've got Stain waiting in the wings to come back. You've even got Chris Morris who bats as well. I can't see Dwan Olafia getting really consistent game time for South Africa. Certainly a good bowler, but I don't think good enough to breach the quality of this fast bowling attack, the first choice options. Now, Keshav Maharaj, again, fantastic Keshav Maharaj. In the first innings, he only got two wickets, but he bowled 30 overs and only went for 58 runs. The way he was able to tarpon in in the first innings, the conditions were not yet helpful, obviously deteriorated quite a lot as the match went on, but at that point in time, the conditions weren't particularly helpful, and he was able to give South Africa a little bit of control. He was the guy who kept South Africa in games in this series with his control. And really, he's a fantastic spinner. I think he's underrated. He hasn't played in Asia yet. He's only played in South Africa, England, New Zealand, and Australia. And yet, his average is well below 30. And I think in this series, he took, I believe it was 17 wickets at 30. That is incredible. For an off spinner in England, he's a class bowler. His control is his greatest strength. Obviously, not a big turner of the ball, but a guy who will always keep you honest. And I think that South Africa have finally solved an issue that has plagued them for many a year. They have an elite spinner in Keshav Maharaj. I can't wait to see him bowl in Asia and see how he can do in more helpful conditions. To be fair, the pitches did offer something, particularly at the back end of games in this series, but I think it was the way he was able to bowl in the first innings that really caught my eye when the pitches were less helpful. And also for him, he didn't have a lot to bowl with. He wasn't really in a position much where he was able to close out a game like Moeen Ali. So he did very well considering the circumstances, bats a bit as well. So a really good asset for South Africa, I think, in the future. But I think the biggest talking point in the bowling was perhaps about a guy who didn't even play this match, Vernon Philander. I thought he was going to play, but apparently he had back spasms on the morning of the game. And so this time South Africa did not risk him. Now, Vernon Philander has been a train wreck with fitness issues in this tour. Coming into the first game, he had an ankle issue, but he overcame that. And then coming into the third game, he had a bug, a sickness bug, but he got over that to an extent. But he was limited. He was limited in his bowling capacity. And now in the fourth game, thought he was going to recover from the bug, but he picked up the back spasm. And certainly, he had a great series when he played. He was virtually unplayable with the ball, and he chipped in really nicely with the bat with a couple of 50s. But questions have to be asked about his fitness. Faf du Plessis talked about it. Graham Smith talked about it. He's such a big player for South Africa. He's really an all-rounder for them, and the fact that he's not on the park consistently is a huge problem for them. Now, Vernon Philander, when you look at him, he's not the most in-shape guy. You don't think Vernon Philander an athlete, do you? He's a little bit chubby, and I think certainly fitness, even to the untrained eye, looks like could certainly improve for Vernon Philander. So hopefully he can work on that. They've got 6 weeks now till the start of the home summer, so hopefully he can begin to work on that because South Africa need him on the park if they're going to be an elite team. Now, that's it for South Africa. The bowling, it underperformed, I think, to be fair. That's largely because Vernon Philander, fitness issues not being there, them having to go to Dwan Olafia. Rabada didn't have his rhythm quite enough, and the batting not giving them anything to bowl with, really. So that's it for South Africa. Problems. Look, South Africa at the end of the day, they're a very talented team. Let's not forget that they've only lost 2 test series away from home in the past 11 years. This is not a bad team. It's got a lot of talent, but there are players underperforming at the moment, and I don't know what it's going to take, but they need to turn it around quickly because they've got big series coming up, and they could fall further if they struggle in those, certainly. And now we'll go to England. England, a good series win. Going into the series, this was all about how were England going to settle in under Joe Root's captaincy, and well, it worked out very well for England. I think positive signs for England, and just looking at England, we'll start with the batting. And Alistair Cook, once again, Mr. Consistent, grinded it out on that first morning with 46. We all know Alistair Cook, class player, over 15,000 first class runs in the last decade. He's a run machine, and obviously the pillar of their batting. Keaton Jennings. Now, just like Heino Kuhn, this game was the final nail in his coffin. It was torturous watching Keaton Jennings bat. He was awful. He looked awful. And unfortunately, I think his time has come. After looking so good initially in India, I think I think the time is done for now for Keaton Jennings. He hasn't got a Test 50 in 9 consecutive innings. Obviously, didn't get one in this series, and definitely the thing that plagued him was that ball going across him, nicking off countless times. Not a big mover of the feet. Looked very tentative at the crease. Not very sure of himself, and certainly looked like a bit of a sitting duck at times in this series. England are going to have to look elsewhere to find a replacement, and they need to do it urgently with the Ashes coming up. Now, let's look at Tom Westley. I thought once again he showed promise in this game. He got a decent 29 in the first innings, and then the second innings, you got a Jaffa from Morne Walker, only got 9. But Tom Westley is clearly a stylish batsman. He's got all the shots, but certainly maybe not quite at that level yet to be an elite test batsman. I feel like still playing almost like it's the level below. He's been able to get away with some technical things, I think definitely that he will have to tighten up, particularly with the Ashes coming up. But I think one to persist with, definitely that number 3 problem is not solved for England, but Wesley's definitely one to persist with that should be given a run in the West Indies series. Joe Root, he was excellent again, got a 50 in the first innings, his customary 50 in a test match. I believe now that's 9 consecutive test matches for Joe Root. It might even be 10 that he has got at least 150. He's Mr. Consistent. And in the second innings, I was really impressed with that when the pitch was deteriorating a lot. He got 49 to make sure that England didn't have too many hiccups. And I like the way that he really adapted. He didn't play a lot down the ground, a lot of square the wicket shots, a lot of sweeps. That was good to see. I like that. A thinking cricketer who adapts to the situation. Great to see from Joe Root. The one thing, obviously, about Joe Root is the conversion rate. He has 12 test centuries, 29 50s. If that can become more of a maybe 1 to 1.5 ratio, or at least 1 to 2 ratio, then that'd be great. If he can score hundreds more consistently, then you've got just, I would say, possibly rivaling Steve Smith there as the best batsman in Test cricket. But an excellent series for Joe Root, certainly with the bat. Although he didn't necessarily get the huge hundreds, he got obviously the 190 in the first game. And even though he didn't get any more hundreds, he still got 461 runs in the series at 57. Such is the consistency of his play. So well done to Joe Root. And David Malan, he struggled again. He looks a little bit underwhelming. Looks very loose, David Malan. I think that's the word for him. He looks very loose. And really, I said before in my review for the last game, he's more of a one-day player. He averages more in list A cricket than first-class cricket, which is quite unusual for a guy who's been picked in the test team before he's played an ODI. So certainly, he definitely has a few technical issues, and I think it would be harsh after 2 games to discard him, but certainly England still have to be wary there, and that's another cloud in England's top order, definitely, and that still needs to be solved. Ben Stokes, he did really well, 58 in the first innings, and he got 23 in the second. Once again, down the order, scoring quick runs, powerful batting. That's just Ben Stokes. What an elite all-rounder he is. For me, he's the best all-rounder in Test cricket. Now, there's a bunch that are really good. Obviously, you've got him, Moeen Ali, you've got Shakib Al Hasan, you've got Ravichandran Ashwin, you've got Ravindra Jadeja. I think you can make arguments for all of them being the best, depending on what you consider the most important. But for me, I like the fact that Ben Stokes turns games on their head and wins games with both bat and ball on a pretty consistent basis. For me, that's the thing that sets Ben Stokes apart. But again, an excellent series for Ben Stokes. And to be fair, I think his bowling in this game he wasn't really needed. To be honest, he didn't bowl much, and he didn't bowl with a lot of rhythm. But the thing about Stokes as a bowler is he's more of an impact bowler. He gets the key wickets, and really that's all you can ask for from an all-rounder. It's such a bonus for England to have a guy like him. Johnny Bairstow back at number 7. He's clearly a number 7. He started at number 5, and he's not great at number 5. He only averages 30 there, but he averages well in excess of 45 at number 7, so I believe he should stick there. 99, fantastic stuff to carry England to 362. He was desperately unlucky. He was given out LBW to Keshav Maharaj. The last wicket of the innings, he reviewed it, and it was just in line. Just a little bit of the ball was in line with the off stump. That is unfortunately how things work when you're given out on the field. There just has to be a tiny, tiny part of the ball in line with the stumps. Impact was just in line, just a feather, and that was that. So I think he can count himself a little unlucky there, can Johnny Bairstow, but certainly deserved 100, and it was really a match-winning knock for England. Johnny Bairstow, excellent once again. And I'd like to also mention he's improved with the gloves. He's still not an elite keeper, but he's getting a little bit better. I think that's the most important thing, that he's improving. Obviously, still, I don't think at the required level. I still think he's capable of making a blunder, but certainly he's a lot better than when he began. And that's a good thing. As long as you're improving, I think that's a good thing. Moeen Ali with the bat. He batted at 9 bizarrely in the first innings. That was really weird when Toby Rowland-Jones came out as the night watchman, didn't even face a ball. How was he protecting Moeen Ali there? That was weird. Moeen coming in at number 9 in the first innings, ridiculous there. And then he came in at 8 in the second, got 75 off 66, typical Moeen Ali, the beautiful cover drive, the cut shot, the flick off the legs. Moeen Ali has all the shots. Obviously, he can be a bit loose. He's not one to shy away from stroke making, but when he's on fire, he's very difficult to stop with the bat. He's not a number 8. He's a class batsman. To me, he's more of a number 6, really. But given the England team, they have the luxury of putting him as low as 8. So, really, Moeen Ali, what can I say about this guy? Look at his bowling in this game. He cleaned up the game, just like a spinner should, on a deteriorating pitch in the last innings, picking up a 5 for. And really, he's improved a lot as a bowler as well. His control has improved. He's getting a lot of drift. He's getting the ball to bite, and definitely becoming a test spinner. You can say now he's a legitimate spinner and not just a part-timer like he was when he started. He scored 252 runs in the series at 36, and he took 25 wickets at 15. 25 wickets at 15 for a guy that at the start of the series was behind Liam Dawson in the pecking order for spinners. Unbelievable. I think it's the first time that a player has scored 250 runs and taken 25 wickets in a 4-match series. That is a legitimate all-rounder there, Moeen Ali. Once again, I've said it time and time again, he's so underrated. I think people see him, he's in the team basically more as a bowler, but he's always been more of a batsman. His batting is very decent batsman, and his spin has always been a little bit of a joke, but he's improved a lot. And he is a decent player, a legitimate test all-rounder, and a big player for England. And certainly one that they need to perform. He's genuinely one of their biggest players. He has become a match winner. That is the crux of it with Moeen Ali. Great stuff from him in this series. The man of the series, richly deserved. And England's bowling now. England's batting, I'll just summarise. The problems that were there at the start of the series are still there. Alistair Cook's opening partner, the number 3 slot, the number 5 slot, still question marks about it. But Joe Root and Alistair Cook, they're the pillars of the top order. And then Ben Stokes, Johnny Bairstow, Moeen Ali, those 3 all-round cricketers are huge to their success. When those 3 score well, England usually win the game. So certainly those issues that they'll hope they can solve at least to an extent in the West Indies series before the Ashes, because there's only 3 tests for them before the big one down under. Now, the bowling for England, Jimmy Anderson once again did what Jimmy Anderson does in England, and that's take a lot of wickets. He took 20 wickets in the series at 14. The guy is basically unplayable in England. He swings the ball both ways. He has impeccable control. Even though he only bowls 125, he's virtually impossible to play. Has been so good for well over a decade. There's not much more to say about Jimmy Anderson. We know what he does, and he keeps doing it in England. And the same can be said for um for Stuart Broad. He only took 11 wickets in this series, but I thought he bowled a lot better than that. Stuart Broad, again, he doesn't bowl very quickly. He only bowls about 125, 130, but he has great control. His his outswinger has deteriorated a bit over time, but his in-swinger now is really, really good. He bowls good cutters as well, and he's also, when he actually decides to be a decent batsman, got an important 50 in the first game. So again, he's getting close to 400 Test wickets. Again, he's been at it for basically a decade now for England, and these two are the best opening bowling partnership in world cricket. But I think the big thing is, can they do the same in Australia? Because both of them don't have as good a records in Australia as they do in England, and that's certainly a big thing that England will hope can be rectified for the Ashes, because their bowling is very dependent on those two. But certainly, Jimmy Anderson in this game, he picked up 7 wickets, and Stuart Broad, he picked up 4. So very nicely done to them, really doing the damage with the new ball in this one. And the only other bowler to talk about is Toby Rowland Jones. And in the second innings, he didn't bowl very much. He got carted a bit, it must be said, by Faf du Plessis and Hashim Amla. But he did get Temba Bavuma out to a very nice delivery. And in the first innings, he also only got the solitary wicket, but it was Hashim Amla, so a very important wicket again. He did decently in this game. Obviously, not the same as his debut game, Toby Rowland Jones here, but he looks a good bowler. As I said before, he's a line and length bowler and definitely can get the ball to nip around, also can handle the bat. Certainly, I think he's put himself in a good position to be on the plane to Australia in these two games. The one thing I will say about England's fast bowling attack is it lacks pace, and certainly in Australia, where the pitches are flatter, you don't get as much lateral movement. I think they'll need some pace. So certainly, I think Mark Wood and probably Stephen Finn, when he's in rhythm, can bowl 140 plus. They'll need a bit of speed, I think, in that attack, because it's lacking a bit. It's a little bit one-dimensional, the attack at the moment. Chris Wokes, to be fair, is probably quicker than all these three, so he'd definitely help when he comes back into the fold. But I think England do need to find a little bit of pace in their attack if they're to do well overseas. But that's it for England. Obviously, a team with the major holes, as I talked about, in the batting. They've obviously got some issues, but definitely there's a lot of talent in the team, and they've got some class players. And this coming up series against the West Indies is going to be crucial for them to build towards the Ashes. Now, I'm going to finish up by giving the big plus points and negatives for both these teams from the series. So the plus point to start off with South Africa, I think there were 3 players really. There weren't many positives for South Africa, but 3 plus points for South Africa for me were probably Morne Morkel, Keshav Maharaj, and I'm going to say Temba Bavuma, because we know what Dean Elgar's about. Temba Bavuma, coming into this series, struggled so badly against Sri Lanka, could not score a run, but he was probably South Africa's most consistent, composed batsman. As I said, didn't get the runs that he would have liked, but certainly he looked good at the crease, and he definitely has a future. He just needs to find a way to score big runs. Keshav Maharaj, the control he had was unbelievable. South Africa have found their solution in the spin bowling department, and Morne Morkel coming back into the team, and it's great for him to be back to boost that South African attack. Certainly someone that South Africa need. But the negatives for South Africa in this series, obviously the batting in general still hasn't clicked. Heino Kuhn, he's out the door. JP Duminy, he's gone. Hashim Amla continues to struggle away from home. Temba Bavuma hasn't scored 100 this year. Faf du Plessis, likewise. Quinton de Kock had a very poor series and was moved around the order. What are they doing with him? Tens de Bruin has not justified his selection yet. So there are huge question marks. The only guy I think who's performing how he should is Dean Elgar at the moment. The other 6 are all not really doing what they need to do. So that has to be fixed urgently for South Africa. The other negative is the instability that is going to be around the team now with the coaching situation. Russell Domingo, it seems like that was his last test. It seems like he will now depart as South African coach. Apparently Otis Gibson, who is currently the England bowling coach, will take over, although that is far from confirmed. Russell Domingo, he took over from Gary Kirsten in 2013, mid 2013. He's had a very up and down time. He came in when South Africa were number one. He's seen them drop to number seven, and he's brought them back up to number two in Test cricket. Obviously, the campaigns in the limited overs comps haven't been great. There was that semi-final at the 2015 World Cup, and the whole controversy with Vernon Philander playing the semi ahead of Kyle Abbott with a little bit of interference due to the transformation targets. Then they had the shambolic capitulation against India at the Champions Trophy. Didn't even make it out of the group when they were a lot of people's favourites. They failed to get out of the group at the ICC World T20, and they got knocked out in that was 2016 edition. They failed to get to the final, knocked out in the semis of the 2014 edition. So they haven't been able to crack their big tournament hoodoo under Domingo, and as a test team, they've been very hot and cold. And I think this series in general, it felt like a change was needed. It felt like South Africa might need some fresh ideas because things just aren't working, particularly with the batting. It's not clicking at all. Obviously, there've been some great wins for South Africa in his time. And to be fair to him, there's been some mitigating circumstances. The retirement of Graham Smith, the retirement of Jacques Kallis, you might as well call it retirement of A.B. de Villiers from Test cricket has certainly not helped. Dale Stein's injury issues, and then also when you have a look at South Africa, I think definitely it's always difficult with the transformation targets. It's a sensitive issue, and I think that's always very difficult to handle. But certainly, I think in the end he's had a I would say it's been very average at the end of the day. I think South Africa would have probably wanted more in this period, and at the moment now, they need to look to rebuild at the end of the day and get back to being a really elite team. They've got a lot of talent, but to be an elite team, I think a change was needed, some fresh ideas, certainly, but that creates instability. So now how does that work with South Africa? They've got a big home summer coming up, 10 tests, Bangladesh, India, Australia. That's going to be big. So how are they going to get everything together? They've got 6 weeks before then. It's going to be very interesting to see how it goes for South Africa. For England, I think the biggest positive, Joe Root as captain, flying colours on his first assignment. I think the way England played in the third and fourth tests after losing that second test quite badly was really positive. The way they bounced back and they continued to play in their brand of cricket, but played with a little bit more application with the bat and a little bit more respect to the bowlers, but they still played proactive cricket. I really liked that. And it showed that Joe Root certainly was able to rally the troops and get them to perform. Just like we've seen with Kane Williamson, Virat Kohli, Steve Smith, no problems in terms of affecting the batting of Joe Root, the captaincy, performing just as well as he has been for many years. So that is certainly not a problem for England. It's a good start for England under Joe Root's captaincy. Promising signs certainly going ahead, particularly looking at the Ashes now, stabilising. The last thing they would have wanted is captaincy issues going into the Ashes. And really that for me is the biggest positive for England. Now, I think the negative for England, I would say, well, another positive actually, I think is the form of Moeen Ali and Ben Stokes, and to a lesser extent Johnny Bairstow, the three all-rounders that are so crucial to their team. Moeen Ali becoming an elite test all-rounder, Ben Stokes proving himself yet again as an outrageous all-round cricketer, Johnny Bairstow coming back to number 7, being a very decent player for them down the order. Those three continuing to thrive is big for England. It helps them become a much better balanced team, gives them a lot of options, and certainly they're going to need that going ahead. Now, I think the pretty obvious negative for England is that there's still issues in that top order. Now, Keaton Jennings, who's going to replace him? There's a few options. You've got Mark Stoneman from Surrey. He's got a lot of runs, the left-hander. You've got Nick Dubbins from Middlesex. He's also got a lot of runs. You've got Haseeb Hameed. He got 77 not out in the last county championship game. It just restarted the county championship, and he's failed for basically the whole season. He hasn't got 100 this season in the county championship, but just at the right time comes back into a little bit of form. Now, does that put him in the picture for the West Indies test? Whoever they pick out of those three, they've got to give them the whole series against the West Indies. Give them that chance to bed in. And for me, I'd go with Hameed. He showed an excellent temperament against India. He's got a very good technique. And he's a guy that has test match experience against a very good team away from home. He's used to the pressure. I say give him a go. Timing is a big thing in selection. just at the right time, he's come back into form. Take advantage of it, England, and really try to exploit that. Now, number three, Tom Wesley. I think he's done enough to warrant more of an opportunity, so I think they should give him more. Definitely, they're certainly not sold, but I think, hey, Tom Wesley, he could be the one there, definitely. Now, David Milan, again, he's only played 2 tests, so I wouldn't be like, just discard him immediately. I'd say probably give him the first test against West Indies at least. But there are some options to replace him, definitely. I think a very interesting one is Alex Hales. There's been talk of Alex Hales coming in at number 5. Now, that's interesting. Obviously, Alex Hales was England's opener last summer, and he had a good start against Sri Lanka, but then he struggled against Pakistan. And to me, when I look at Alex Hales, he's got all the shots. He's been fantastic, particularly in the limited overs domestic tournaments in the county season thus far, but his technique wasn't probably well suited to being a test opener. Coming down at number 5, that might suit him more because he has all the shots, we know that, and he has played at opener, so he has the experience of playing against high quality bowling in difficult circumstances. So certainly I don't see why not. They could give him a go. I think he'd be the one probably to come back in, has a lot of test experience. Gary Ballance is the other option, but really, can they go back to him? No, I don't think he's up to the standard required for England. I think it's good to have another good aggressive batsman. I like that sort of stuff. That's the formula England have gone with. I think they should stick with that. So definitely Alex Hales waiting the wigs, but I'd say give David Milan the next game. So England, they have the West Indies series now, a full tour. That starts in a week's time. Day-night game, England's first day-night test match. That's at Edgbaston. So I'll be looking ahead to that series in due time. I think in terms of competitiveness, I don't think England should struggle in beating the West Indies. Obviously, a very weak team, particularly without their star players. But I think it's important for them to really nail down the combination before the Ashes. So that is my review of the fourth test between England and South Africa. To summarize, England, they're building something. Still a few things to work on. South Africa, they took a back step here. A lot of things to work on, but still very talented team nonetheless. Now, I want to finish off the podcast talking about the Caribbean 2020 League. Yes, it kicked off about a week ago. And, well, for me, it's interesting, this tournament. I look at it, there's a distinctly Pakistani flavor in the overseas players. And then you've got a few retired players. You've got like Brendan McCullum, Kumar Sangakkara, guys like that. But it's nice to see the Pakistani players getting an opportunity. Obviously, they can't play in the IPL due to political reasons, so certainly it's good to see them being put on the international spotlight in this tournament. Now, there's been some interesting things about this tournament so far. Certainly the pitches, the high score in the first innings in the first 6 games has been 154. So very typical West Indian slow, low pitches, which I don't think is conducive to good 2020 cricket. I think 2020 cricket, first and foremost, is entertainment. That's what the product is. And I don't think these slow, low pitches where it's very difficult to score is helpful to that. I think it's counterproductive. So it's yet another thing that these slow, low pitches in the West Indies hinders in terms of their cricket. Like to see more batting-friendly pitches. Batting-friendly pitches are fine in 2020s. Obviously, you don't want that in the other forms too much, but in 2020s, you're supposed to have batting-friendly pitches. So that dilutes the quality a bit, I feel, because it becomes a little bit difficult to watch, I feel, in this case. Now, I think so far each team's played 2 games. We've had 6 games, and definitely the team so far of the tournament has been Trinidad and Tobago, and they've looked very good. They have a very strong bowling attack. I'm looking at that. They've got Shadab Khan, they've got Sunil Narayan, they've got Blaine Bravo, they've got Kevin Cooper. He's a very experienced campaign in 2020s. They've got Ronsford Beaton, who's a good young West Indian fast bowler. They've got a really nice bowling attack. Not to mention they've got Brendan McCullum. They've got Colin Munro with the bat as well. They've got Darren Bravo. So certainly they've got a really nice team, and they're certainly pushed out as early favourites. I think the player who's really caught the eye is definitely Shadab Khan. He's got 2 Man of the Match awards. Shadab, he's only 18 years old, but he was an instrumental part of Pakistan's win at the Champions Trophy just a few months ago, and he's continuing to show what an immense talent he is. Quality leg spin bowler with great control, can bowl the googly, and he bats as well. He can certainly hit a long ball, and also in the field. He's a good fielder, very athletic, so un-Pakistani. And I think it's really good for Pakistan to produce an athletic cricketer because their fielding is one of the things that lets them down. But to have a guy like him, he would certainly be infectious to the other players. So certainly Shardab is one of the biggest talents in world cricket and certainly an early favourite for player of the tournament in the CPL. Probably the biggest talking point so far has been the games played in Lauderhill, Florida, in the USA. Obviously, the CPL has been exporting some games to the USA for the last few seasons, and we had a whole round of fixtures, four fixtures on the last weekend. They were played in the US, and the crowds weren't great, to be honest with you. It didn't hit me as a real success. And I think it's simple. If you look at the people in the crowd, they're South Asian expatriates or they're expatriates from the Caribbean. These aren't really Americans. You're not growing the game to a new audience. These are all people who have anyway grown up with cricket. And it's just a cultural barrier that I don't think cricket will ever be even remotely embraced by the USA. I think I'll talk about this phenomenon certainly in a later podcast, but I just can't ever see that happening. I applaud them for trying, and certainly if it succeeds, there's a very lucrative opportunity there in terms of money, but I just can't see it working in the USA, unfortunately. There's just a cultural barrier there. So I think that's definitely been the talking point so far. But obviously, the CPL, you have both. You have all the teams that play each other twice in that round robin, and then you have the semis and the final. So I'll be doing roundups of the tournament throughout the tournament, and I'm not going to really focus on each individual game too closely. Just giving a general overview of what's been going on, because in all honesty, it is a bit of a second tier tournament, I would say. If you look at the international players, they're decidedly second tier. You don't have the top international players playing in this tournament. And not to mention the fact that it is very bizarre that you've got a West Indies team currently touring England, and then you've got all probably the biggest stars in the West Indies playing in this tournament. It makes me uneasy. But yeah, it is a bit of a second tier tournament, I would say. At the moment, I think the IPL and the Big Bash certainly are probably the real two top tier 2020 tournaments. But still, I think it's a good competition with the West Indies. You get the colour, the flair, the celebrations, the dancing, that calypso spirit. It's such a big part of cricket, and the West Indies are an integral part of cricket. So certainly, it still has some merit. But that is it for me today. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. If you did, you can check it out. We're on iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube. All the links to those platforms can be found on the Twitter page. And the next podcast, I think, will be another Hot Topics podcast that should be there in a couple of days. But that's it for me today. As always, thanks for listening, and I'll see you later.